2004, United Kingdom. The small town of Bishop Auckland. A girl named Courtney is born into the Hadwin family. She grows up quiet, withdrawn, always shy about talking to strangers. Teachers at school note, she is afraid to go up to the board. She blushes when someone addresses her. No one could have imagined then that this very girl would one day become the center of attention for millions. 2017, 12-year-old Courtney tries herself on stage for the first time on The Voice Kids UK. She sings Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits and makes it to the final. The judges applaud, but her voice remains in the shadow of bigger artists. It seemed like that was it, but in reality, that was when the wild energy first showed itself. The energy that would explode across America a year later. 2018, America. Courtney is 13. She steps onto the stage of America's Got Talent, Season 13. Thousands of spectators sit in the hall. The judges, Heidi Klum, Mel B, Simon Cowell, Howie Mandel. To the eye, she's an ordinary, shy girl from Britain. Her voice trembles, her hands shake. Everyone expects a failure. And then, Joe Cocker's Hard to Handle begins. In an instant, the world freezes. The little schoolgirl turns into a rock diva. She moves across the stage as if electrified. The voice, torn, grown, feral. Comparisons to Janis Joplin and Amy Winehouse appear instantly. Howie Mandel hits the golden buzzer. Confetti falls from above. The video of her performance gains over 50 million views on YouTube in a week. This is not just a success, it's a global sensation. The girl who was afraid to speak in class is now conquering America. From that moment on, her life split into before and after. Hundreds of interviews, thousands of publications, contracts and offers. 13-year-old Courtney becomes the face of the season. The media call her Little Janis Joplin, a girl from another time. But with the rapture comes the flip side. A torrent of comments appears on social media. She screams, she doesn't sing. Overrated, it's all staged. Thousands of strangers discuss her, judge her, dismantle her image. For a child, this becomes a heavy blow. In interviews, she admits, every time before going on stage, she is gripped by terror. I feel like my heart is going to jump out of my chest, she will say later. But the audience doesn't see that. They see only fire and confidence. No one suspects that behind the applause, a tragedy begins, one that will haunt her for many years.
After the America's Got Talent 2018 finale, Courtney Hadwin found herself at the center of the entire show business world. She was offered contracts, tours, advertising. In 2019, her mini-album The Cover Sessions is released, a collection of covers where she performs songs by Tina Turner and other legends. Videos of her songs continue to gather millions of views, but inside there was fear. She was only 15, and they were already demanding the image of a rock goddess. The producers insisted, "You have to be wild, strange, eccentric, that's your brand." Courtney wanted to write her own songs, but they answered, "No, the public needs what we've devised." She signs papers without fully understanding their meaning. Her name, her voice, her freedom gradually become the property of the industry. At first, there were mild dizzy spells, then fainting. Psychologists called it overload. A teenager's body could not keep up with the pace of an adult star. But no one stopped. You have to work while they're talking about you. And one day at rehearsal, Courtney simply collapsed. The doctor said, "Stress, you need to slow down." But she couldn't slow down, because if she stopped, the world would forget her as quickly as it had loved her. The scariest blow did not come from haters, but from those she trusted. Someone on the team sold her private messages to journalists. Headlines appeared with phrases like, "Courtney doesn't believe in her success. Courtney hates her song." Was it true? Possibly, but words torn from context turned her into an enemy of herself. Fans began to doubt, the media orchestrated a pile-on, and the girl found herself face-to-face with betrayal. One night, Courtney simply disappeared. The stage, the fans, the glitter, everything was left behind. She returned home to a quiet British town. She shut herself in her room. For weeks, she didn't go out. Her parents sounded the alarm. The girl who had recently shaken America now sat on the floor and refused to speak. That was the moment when fame finally stopped being her dream. It became her nightmare. The world froze. Fans asked questions. Where is Courtney? What happened? Journalists invented versions. Illness, depression, conflict. But the real reason lay deeper. In the silence of her room, Courtney realized for the first time she didn't know who she was. The voice, someone else's. The stage, someone else's. The life, someone else's. Her own self had dissolved in the applause that had long since stopped being for her. When she came back on stage again, it was already a different person. More grown, more guarded, colder. Her voice still tore the hall apart, but something inside was broken, and the audience felt it. Some said she lost the magic. Others, she became stronger. But the truth was different. Before them stood a girl who had lived through a tragedy no one knew about. When Courtney returned to performing after her triumph on America's Got Talent 2018, she hoped she could take control. But it turned out the opposite. The contract she had signed in the first months of fame became her shackles. Her every move, every note, every social media post was controlled by grown men in expensive suits. She wanted to change the style of her songs, to add something of her own. But they told her, no, you must remain the way they loved you. Your screams and crazy dances are your brand. Inside, she seethed. She understood they were turning her into a product. But if she refused, she would have to pay penalties, huge sums a teenager can't even think about calmly. The world applauded, but behind the scenes stood a girl whose eyes reflected fear. For the first time, she realized her freedom was worth more than any ovation. On stage, lights, hundreds of people, a sea of phones pointed at her. But when she stepped off into the wings, the emptiness began. She had almost no friends left. Classmates in Britain were jealous and sneered, "Oh, the star has arrived." In America, the only people around her were those paid to be there. Even in hotel rooms, she was surrounded by silence. Sometimes she turned on the TV to drown out the void. Sometimes she wrote messages and erased them without sending. She could fill a stadium, but couldn't find a single person who truly understood her. This emptiness grew, and every time she went on stage, Courtney felt she was playing a role she no longer wanted to be. 2021, a strange call. A man's voice on the line said, "You must keep quiet." She thought it was a prank, but the next day, her parents received an unsigned letter. Inside was a newspaper clipping with her photograph and the words, "She will pay for everything." At first, they decided it was hate, but soon someone began watching her house. Neighbors noticed a black car that would sit nearby for long stretches. This was a new level of horror. If before she feared the stage, now she feared for her life. And worst of all, the police couldn't help. "There's no direct threat," they said. And that was when Courtney first had the sense her tragedy was only beginning. The more Courtney tried to withdraw into the shadows, the stronger the pressure grew. Producers demanded performances, fans demanded new songs, and the family stayed silent, not knowing how to protect her. One evening, a label representative came into her dressing room. He set a contract in front of her and said coldly, "If you don't go on stage tomorrow, you'll pay for every canceled concert, millions." She looked at the lines in tiny print and understood there was no way out. Either she would become a marionette, or they would simply destroy her financially. And at that moment, a thought took hold, one that would torment her for many months. What if it's easier to disappear for good? At night, she stood before the mirror for a long time. Makeup, lashes, a bright costume, the image invented for the stage. But the longer she looked at the reflection, the more clearly she saw a stranger's face. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. For the first time, she admitted to herself she hated what she had become. Her voice, once her salvation, had become a curse. Fame, once a dream, had become a cage. And all she had left that was real was her pain.
It was at that moment that something inside her broke. She decided either she would find a way out or this story would end in the darkest way. A few weeks later, Courtney disappeared again, only this time not at home. She fled to London, to a small studio where no one knew her name. There, she recorded a song for the first time without pressure, without directives, without a golden button hanging over her head. It was a cry of the soul, raw and uneven, but real. When she put on the headphones and heard herself, for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of freedom. But that freedom didn't last. The recording leaked online. Fans split. Some cried genius, others said that Courtney has lost herself. And the worst part, the people she had fled found her again. The phone rang. "You belong to us," a voice said on the line. It seemed Courtney had no way out, but she hoped at least for her family's support. And suddenly, a blow from where she least expected. One close relative she trusted sold details of her escape to the press for money. Newspapers came out with headlines. Courtney Hadwin ran away from fame, the young star on the verge of a nervous breakdown. These words were true, but presented as if she were a broken toy soldier. The crowd craved spectacle. Journalists staked out the studio's doors. People she had known since childhood turned away. The scariest realization, she understood she could no longer trust anyone. Not family, not friends, not colleagues. She was left alone against the whole world. Even in London, people began to recognize her. They approached with cameras, filmed her reactions, posted them online. Every step became a meme, every word a headline.
She tried to wear a hood, to hide, but it didn't help. The more she hid, the more actively they searched for her. And at some point, Courtney understood. Her name had become a cage from which there was no escape. The bitterest thing was that she did not feel alive. She seemed to exist for others' expectations, others' likes, others' fears. Her own life was dissolving. And inside, the thought hardened. If the cage can't be broken, perhaps the only way out is to disappear forever. At night, she wrote a letter, several pages in a trembling hand. There were no grand words, no accusations, only silence, exhaustion, and the confession, "I don't know who I am, and I don't know if I can find myself." She left the letter on the table and went out into the night. No one knew where. She didn't take a phone, she didn't take a passport, she simply vanished. Her parents raised the alarm. The media shouted about a missing star. Fans wrote thousands of messages, "Courtney, come back." But she was gone. And for the first time, the whole world felt that this was not just a story about fame. This was a tragedy that could end irreversibly. The police launched an official search for Courtney across Britain. Her absence became the #1 news item, missing young star of America's Got Talent. Security cameras spotted her figure in a dark cloak at the Leeds train station. That was the last reliable confirmation of her presence. After that, the trail went cold. The press whipped up hysteria. Some outlets wrote about abduction, others hinted at a suicide attempt. Fans split. Some blamed producers, others the family, and others still claimed she was simply exhausted and had gone into hiding voluntarily. But the truth remained a mystery. That night, Courtney really did stand on the platform. In her hands was a one-way ticket. But where she went, no one learned. And then the internet exploded over a strange photo. In a shot taken by a passerby in a London suburb, a girl in a hood sat on the steps of an old building. The caption, "Looks like Courtney Hadwin." Hundreds of fans rushed to the area, but when journalists arrived, the building was empty. Only a shadow remained on the wall, resembling her silhouette. This photo became a legend. Some claimed Courtney was hiding voluntarily, others that she was being held against her will. Later, it became known the singer really did live there for several weeks. Without a phone, without electricity, practically without contact with the outside world. Every day she asked herself the same question: did she have the right to return to the stage? A neighbor called an ambulance to one of London's districts.
In the house where Courtney had been hiding, a crash was heard. She was found unconscious, next to an empty bottle of water and several sheets of paper. Doctors diagnosed severe exhaustion. The girl's body could not withstand the constant stress and isolation. She was hospitalized urgently. Dozens of cameras kept vigil at the hospital doors. The world got its spectacle again. People demanded answers. What happened to her? In the media, she was called either a heroine broken by fame or a victim of her own pride. But one fact stood out. Her story had finally ceased to be a fairy tale about the 2018 Golden Buzzer. It had turned into a tragedy about the price of a dream. After being discharged from the hospital, Courtney hoped to start with a clean slate. But the world was not waiting for her recovery. It was waiting for a new sensation. Journalists kept watch at the door of her parents' house in Bishop Auckland, intercepted her on the road, and filmed her with hidden cameras. Newspapers ran with loud headlines: "Broken Wonder Girl, Hero or Victim?" In May, British outlets began placing her name alongside the tragic fates of Amy Winehouse and Kurt Cobain, hinting at a repetition of their path. Each such comparison wounded her even more. She saw her photograph on front pages and realized the world was burying her alive. Despite everything, Courtney decided on a step that was supposed to restore her strength. She went back on stage. A small club, only a few hundred people. No frills, no golden buzzer, just her and a microphone. She sang the first song as if screaming in pain. People in the hall cried. This was not show business, it was a cry from the heart. But along with the applause came a new fear. Phones were filming again. Recordings were spreading across the internet again. And Courtney realized, even here, her freedom was an illusion. Even on a small stage, she still remained a captive. A few days later, she received a letter. Not from a fan, not from friends. A letter from the company with which the first contract had been signed. There were only a few lines. Either you come back to us, or we will destroy everything you have left. We will take the rights to your songs, your recordings, your image. It was a sentence. They put her before a choice: become a marionette again or lose even what she had created in suffering.
And at that moment, Courtney understood. It was time to make a decision that would change everything. Courtney sat in her room with the letter in her hands. It felt as if decades were behind her. The contract demanded obedience, the internet demanded a show, and her soul demanded silence. She called a lawyer. The voice on the other end said, "They've cornered you, but there is one path, the courts. It will be dirty, long, and dangerous, but if you dare, you can win your name back." Sue the industry? Those with power, money, and connections? It seemed like suicide. But for the first time in her life, Courtney felt either she made a move now, or her story would end according to someone else's script. Hearings began. Crowds of reporters, cameras, headlines. Little rebel versus the giants of show business. In the courtroom, Courtney looked fragile, but her voice sounded firm. She spoke of how she had been stripped of freedom, forced to be a product, and betrayed. Every word was a challenge, but every session was a new torment. The company's lawyers painted her as a capricious child who had failed to handle fame. And yet, the further the case went, the more people began to believe. She was not a victim, she was a fighter. After months of struggle, the court's ruling sounded like a sentence, but this time not for her. The contract was recognized as violating the rights of a minor. She won her freedom. Her songs, her name, her right to be herself belonged to her again. But there was no joy. It was not a victory, it was survival. She stood on the courthouse steps, cameras blinding her eyes, and suddenly she smiled, sincerely for the first time in a long while.
Because now she knew the tragedy had not destroyed her. She had passed through a mortal threat, through betrayal, through the hell of fame, and emerged different. Not the little girl with the golden buzzer, not a copy of other legends, herself, the real Courtney Hadwin. After the trial, Courtney turned down big arenas and noisy shows. She disappeared from television, closed her social media, stopped giving interviews. People speculated, what about her? Some insisted she was broken and won't return. Others that she was secretly writing a new album. But Courtney herself chose silence. She returned to the small town where she had once begun. Sometimes people saw her walking a dog, sometimes in the library, sometimes singing softly on an empty street. Not for the public, for herself. And it was strange. Millions demanded a show, but for the first time, she was happy without a stage. In 2025, Courtney Hadwin is actively pursuing her music career as an independent artist. She released her debut album titled Little Miss Jagged, which includes tracks with deeply personal lyrics. She previously had a contract with Simon Cowell's label, but they parted ways, and now Courtney fully controls her music and creative process. In February, the single Spellbound was released. Courtney is popular on social media, especially on TikTok, where she shares her work and her personal charisma. She is focused on creating music in her own unique style, avoiding pressure from the music industry, and preserving sincerity and authenticity. After a performance, the press writes, she has closed the circle. From her debut on The Voice Kids UK in 2017 to a small hometown stage in 2025. But this is not the end. Rather, it is an open question. Will Courtney go further or finally choose silence? Fans are sure her story is not over yet. But at this very moment, it becomes clear. Whatever choice she makes, the name Courtney Hadwin has already entered the history of the 21st century as one of the most controversial and tragic figures in show business.